with thanksgiving.
Hello and welcome. I'm Bonnie Libhart. If there were a way that you could use some things that you probably learned from your grandmother, yesterday's remedies for today's ills, you probably want to know how, wouldn't you? Well, you're going to have that opportunity today, because today our guest is, if you remember Abe and Nancy, I'm sure you do, Harris. Well, and we mentioned about Abe's dad being here from Florida. I think I may have said Georgia, but it's Florida, Claremont, Florida, and he's here in the studio with us, and we're going to talk about yesterday's remedies for today's ill. Now, Dr. Harris, Dr. Richard Dick Harris, is known, well, he's a pharmacist, number one, and he also has written a book about yesterday's remedies for today's ills, and it's a compilation of 50 years of experience from people who said, well, my grandma used to do, and he would tell, they would tell you. Welcome to Victor Network and
Thank you so
Vision
much. It's
Plus.
a pleasure to be here, Miss Bonnie.
I tell you, I have to give some of the things that happened to me. Well, number one, you had many years, you didn't do this, but many years ago, I got allergic or nauseous when I would smell, let's say bug spray, for instance. So you had a recommendation in here for using lemon juice and vinegar, not necessarily, there were two different places, I think, to stop the tracks of ants and different kinds of varmints that can come in like ants and those kind of things. And I thought, wow, I love to smell lemon juice and vinegar too. It always reminds me of my mom when she did major cleaning. So I put that down, and you would not believe how it just cleared it up like that. I actually looked for them to see where did they go to, but anyway, they were gone and they didn't come back.
They had to find another way to get in.
They didn't find another way to get in. And another thing, I had a burning, hey, this sounds crazy, but it's really true, Dr. Harris. I had a burning sensation. Well, about a year or so ago, I had what they called precancer cells on my nose area, and it's been gone because we prayed it away, but it came back and it burned and it was red for at least a week or two. I took some of the it's called
Healing Soup.
Yeah, no, that wasn't what I was using. I'm sorry, I'm going to find out more about that later.
Peroxide.
The peroxide, yes, and baking soda. I just made a paste of that, and every hour or so I would just put a little paste of that on. Well, first of all, it cooled it immediately, and it bubbled up a little bit, and it quit hurting, and it went away. I loved it. I thought, this guy I've got to meet. Everything from using baking soda for if you have an upset stomach, instead of getting some of the remedies. Now, as a pharmacist, maybe I shouldn't be saying all these things, but you said it first.
Well, I collected these remedies for 50 years, as you mentioned, and with the idea of someday putting them in a book. And many of them came from my grandmothers and from my aunts and from friends and customers. I've always had a wonderful relationship with my customers, and one would come in and say, Dick, I've got the worst case of chapped lips you can imagine. What's the best thing you can do for chapped lips? And I'd share with them, well, the best thing for chapped lips is fresh cow manure. It won't heal them up, but it'll sure keep you from licking them. And then after we shared the joke, I would tell them it was a joke if they didn't know. Then I'd say, well, we don't have any of that. But the next best thing, and then I would pick whatever I had the most confidence in and sell them. And not to help matters at all, I had a typist who was with me for 20 years, and she lived on a farm and had cows, and she'd say, I could furnish it for you fresh every day. But we never had anyone that took us up on that.
Now, that's just a part of what has happened to me with your book. And first of all, I read it because you have the ichthus on it, the ichthus being the sign of the fish.
Yes.
Now, tell me why you put the sign of the fish on and what it means.
Well, I realize that all healing comes from God, and that's the first premise of any healing. And then the second is, I am a Christian, and I know that if you do things that are in keeping with God's will, knowing that my body is His temple, I'm going to have a lot better opportunity of healing than if I just try to go off on my own and go to a doctor without any faith in anything and try to do it myself. So I'm a great believer in helping God help you. Don't sit and wait for him to heal you. Go ahead, pray for it and believe, and then go ahead and do some things. And your grandmother and many other people had remedies that were just as effective years ago as they are today.
That's right.
They've
Well,
been
the aloe
replaced
is
with a lot of
spoken
expensive things.
in the Bible. The aloe that you mentioned, aloe vera, and the different herbs that they had, they were mentioned, and they were used for that purpose. We need to get back more to that. Another little thing that I think you might find comical too. I'm in this Toastmasters Club president, and so I got your book, and I was to speak last Tuesday night, and I took. One of the things I think is wonderful about it is the fact that it has jokes or humor, after good, clean humor, I call it, after each one of the remedies, like if you want to do something for arthritis or whatever it is. So I marked some that I thought were just precious. I know some of them are very, very old. You probably got them from your grandmother.
Oh, I got them from my friends. And
even
I
the jokes.
Them. The jokes too, yes. And of course I had to censor some.
And I recognize
but the ones that are in here are acceptable and,
they are.
Good
And so I went through those, and the people came up later and said, boy, I like the fact that you have some fresh jokes for us, you know. But they really did enjoy them. So in addition to, you know, it's like trying to read an encyclopedia when you think about reading, okay, fever, or fire ant killer, or first aid, fish attractant, whatever it is, handcraft. But if you can go on, you read the remedy, and then you read some jokes after that, and it helps you to go into the next one. How did you collected these, but how did you really get involved in writing the book? I mean, I know you had the material, but to go from idea to action is what a lot of us would like to know.
Well, let me tell you, if you need to know how not to write a book, I can start with that.
Okay.
Because I had a Texas Instrument computer, a cheap, original home computer. And that's what I wrote my book on. And I had a manuscript, several hundred pages. And then I found, when I got ready to go to a publisher, that this Texas Instrument computer is not compatible with any other modern computer. So I was going to have to retype the whole thing.
Well, first of all, I heard that you had it all in capital letters, too. So that
oh, my mother said, oh, that's nice, easy reading. So I did it in all capital letters. And that was another no-no. The printer says, no, you don't ever do anything in all capital letters. Well, you know, ignorance is bliss, and I was quite blissful.
And so you had to go back and do the whole thing.
So I had to correct the whole thing, and fortunately Terry was home and helped with the typing. And I got it finally arranged and published, and a few little things happened. One of on the back, my former pastor, Charlie Kinder, wrote a thing to go on it, a statement to go on it, and he said, it's just like Dick to write a book filled with practical advice, made palatable with a good sense of humor. As I read the manuscript, a scripture came to mind, a merry heart doeth good like a medicine, Proverbs 17:22. And isn't it true that it makes you feel a lot better if you can have a merry heart? And
one of my favorites is that one. Now, why would you, as a pharmacist, recommend some, well, they're not wives' tales if they really work, but some of these ideas that don't cost a lot of money?
Bonnie, the most important thing is if someone has a problem, is try to help them with it. And the first thing you have to do is sort of understand the problem and communicate really with them. And then feel for them. When I go to a doctor, I want my doctor to hurt just like I'm hurting. And if he's not that kind of doctor, I need to find me another one. Somebody that's empathetic. I don't mean really in pain with me, but realizing that this pain that I'm suffering is real. And I've been so blessed. I have very little pain. In my whole life, I've taken 2 sleeping pills, and they were given to me while I was in the hospital about to have surgery. And I slept for about a week each time. So I'm just not used to taking medicine. I believe medicine is made to give and prepare and to sell, not take. If the whole world would be better off if they'd take fewer pills. But and you don't go to a brain surgeon if all you have is a headache. You take an aspirin. Do the simple things first. And these remedies are simple things and yet very effective in many cases.
I think there's also the situation where that, isn't it true that many times most things have to run its course anyway, no matter what you do. So if you can just eliminate some of the, maybe the discomfort, then you're probably...
Well, that's what they say about a cold. It takes 7 days for a cold to last if you don't treat it, and a week if you do.
Okay. What are some of your favorites of yesterday's remedies for today?
Some of my favorites. One of them I want to share with you is on page 137, and several friends about a neck bag, and these symptoms are in large print, and with the remedies and pharmacist consulting, what I would tell you if you came in with a problem, and then followed by 2 bits of humor, and then goes to the next symptom. But several friends said that in their childhood, their mother sent them to school with a little bag tied around their neck containing 2 or 3 items inside to ward off all kinds of infection and diseases, especially in the winter. Did you ever? You didn't have to do that.
No, I didn't do that.
I did. Okay, my mother sent me with that. These friends were telling me the items in the bag were camphor gum or balls, asafoetida gum, and a clove or 2 of garlic. And they said that the odor was breathtaking, literally. And that if all of their friends had not been wearing the neck bags, they wouldn't have had any close friends. And I'm a sufferer of that, because my mother did send that to me.
I remember my mom putting Vicks Salve on me, and with it had to be a wool, yes, had to be wool, something special.
Flannel cloth.
Flannel cloth. That's
they called them a cere cloth, and I'll tell about those in here and tell how to make them. And they're just as effective as they were.
Mm-hmm. And you can do some of these things at home immediately. You don't have to take the child to the doctor, possibly 10 o'clock at night or 2 o'clock in the morning. Just try this, because the doctor's probably going to say take 2 aspirin, call me in the morning anyway.
Right.
So
one of the stories I have in here, a friend shared with me about the man that called the doctor at 2 in the morning and said, "Doctor, come over quick. My wife is having an appendicitis attack." He said, "Give her 2 aspirin and go back to sleep and see me in the morning in the office." I remember distinctly 3 years ago I removed your wife's appendix, and I've never heard of anyone having 2 appendixes. And the caller said, "Well, doctor, have you ever heard anybody having 2 wives?" So sometimes you have to make sure you're communicating them.
That's right. Well, when the humor that you have, and a merry heart doeth good like a medicine, how do you feel like that God led you into doing this? What do you think is going to be the result of your writing this particular book?
Well, over the years, I have been able to help many people, and not by practicing medicine, because I'm a pharmacist, not a medical doctor. But I also observe a lot of things, and I've learned a lot and stored it so that I could share it. And here comes, I wrote this book because I'm 70. I retired 4 years ago. I was going to work until 70, but stress, I was in a very busy store, and stress sort of began to affect my heart. It was going pitter-patter, like whenever I see a beautiful lady like yourself, my heart would go pitter-patter, and when I wouldn't even be seeing a beautiful lady, and that's bad, you see, when you don't have anything that's causing it. So my doctor checked me, and he said, "Well, I want you to see a cardiologist." And they both said, if you're under stress, but if you get out from under it, chances are you won't have any more problems. I paid for their advice. I like to get my money's worth, so I took their advice. And I haven't been to see a doctor since, and enjoyed good health. And that's when I had time to write my book. And many people would come to see me, and one of my favorites is, here's a young lady that has her first baby 1,000 miles away from home. Her mother would know exactly what to do for this baby's problem, but they have no telephones. It's in the middle of the week. There's $5 or $6 left from the paycheck. The doctor has said, "Now you owe me quite a bit of money. Why don't you pay your bill before you come back?" But this baby's been crying for 2 days with something simple like colic or diarrhea or diaper rash or something that her mother would have been able to help with. And there's no money in the bank, so she can't go to the doctor, or she feels that she can't. And here she comes to the drugstore hoping to find someone that would be compassionate and understanding and knowledgeable to try to help with the problem. And after you talk with her and find out that the baby has no temperature and is really not sick, but it sounds like something one of my 5 had when we were raising them, then you'd go ahead and say, well, now, if it was my baby and I couldn't go to the doctor, this is what I would try to do. And I'd tell her exactly, and maybe she has at home already what she needs to mix together, like if it required the peroxide and the baking soda or the lemon juice or some of those kind of things. She has that. She doesn't have to have any money, and yet she can give relief. And that's the purpose, is to try to help people. And of course you hope to make a living at it too. You have to. But you also have to believe that God's going to take care of you. And if you keep reflecting to people His love is going to be coming back, bouncing back. And that's not why you give the love or exhibit it or the help. But that's, what's the old saying, the biblical, cast your bread on the waters and it'll come back? Well, you don't cast it because it's coming back. You cast it because it needs to be done. You have to help people. Well, that's been my philosophy. I was raised in that. My family taught me that, and I've tried to pass this on to my family and to all the people that I've had working for me over the years. That the customer is very important, and without the customer, you don't need help. You don't need a store. You don't need. There's no jobs for anybody if there's not someone there helping with it.
I met your lovely wife last night, and I know you have 5 children. One of them we've met, Abe, and he mentioned that he didn't feel like, when he was maybe a young, in his early youth, that his father-son relationship was not as great as he'd like for it to be. That's been repaired since that time, but what did you go through by having, well, we'll use Abe since we've met him, Terry, but tell us how that relationship was and how you viewed it as a dad.
Well, there's several things. First, I was a pharmacist working about 12 hours most days a week, like 80 hours a week was my work week. That doesn't leave as much time for your family. I was active in the church. I was active in Boy Scouts with Terry and with our other son. I was active in Girl Scout with our 3 daughters, as was my wife, Audrey. And so I'm sure that there are things that we could have done, that I could have done, and so forth, that I didn't, you know, so that we couldn't have that close. But we went Sunday school and church together, and we, if they needed transportation for whatever, either Audrey or I did our part of doing that, Little League and so forth. So I was really, when he went off to college, and I heard him say something to the effect, I don't know who I am, I was a little shocked, because in my whole life I have always known who I was. I have always known that I'm a child of God and that God loves me, and I was surrounded by loving people. Now, all things didn't go my way. I got my posterior warmed many times when I needed it, and occasionally sometimes when I thought I didn't need it, but chances are I probably did. And so when later on Abe got in touch with me and or came home, and he gave me a gift, and talking about my dad, and I was just real pleased with this, but I was shocked to find that he felt that he was a problem child, because he never was.
You didn't think of it. Now,
the prodigal son is what I was seeking for, and it didn't come. But he wasn't a prodigal son, but in his mind he was. And this is, you know.
Well, the time that he was locked out of his apartment, the story was told last week, so I want to hear your side of it. And Nancy had said that he climbed up the 3 floors, and he fell down on his head, and that there was a possibility that you and his mother thought he was trying to injure himself.
Well, that didn't really occur to me. I just understood it as an accident. He lived in a real high-ceiling house, an old-fashioned house with 12-foot ceilings. And he was on the 3rd floor. He went up and had realized he'd forgotten his key. He didn't want to wake up his roommate because it was early in the morning. And so he went back down. And then he remembered that there was a window open at the end of the hall. And so he comes back upstairs, goes to the end of the hall, opens that window, and 6 feet over on the wall, with his fingers between bricks and his boots on a little half-extended ledge brick just sticking out, he got over and got the window up with one hand and was about to go in when he fell, about 30 feet or so, on his head on concrete. And I never thought it was anything like that. Didn't occur to me. Again, this is several people see something. You had a lot more
faith in him than he thought you had.
Oh,
do you
no
think
question.
that's a possibility, that a lot of times parents have more faith in their children than their children think they do?
I'm sure, and particularly if they're Christian parents.
That's what I mean.
Yes, because and so you keep praying and you keep going, and you know that God is going to be faithful in His own time. Now, He's got a time for everything.
Quickly share some of this. Of course, I want to get over to something else that we mentioned just a moment ago, and that's the heal and soothe and some other ideas. But if you wanted to go through that, that would be very precious to hear.
Well, he wrote this, and
go ahead and read it.
I was just real thrilled with it. He said, my dad is an amazing man. He is a kind man who directs his kindness toward others in both word and deed. My dad loves Jesus. He has spent much time in the local church and in missionary activity. My dad loves his wife and family. He has worked hard providing a good home and life for them. My dad has funny stories for every occasion. Well, he thinks they're funny. My dad is loved by his church, his wife, and his family. My dad and I have not always gotten along, but my love and respect for him have grown as we have both grown together. I love you. You shall always be my dad. So I was just really thrilled with that, and that, you know, that meant that he had gotten over the feeling of being a prodigal son, which we had never felt that he was. He just needed some help, and the good Lord got his attention when he fell out. He didn't cause him to fall, but He allowed him to fall and land on his head. And we were called by the doctor. He was in Vanderbilt. In Nashville, Tennessee, and had gone to college across the street from Vanderbilt and was very familiar with their college and medical school. So he asked the medical people to take him there to the medical center. And they called us and said they were going to be in surgery. He had fractured skull and a concussion and brain fluid coming out his nose, and his nose was broken over to one side. He had lots of problems, no question. And we were praying for him and made arrangements to get off in about 3 hours after that and drive up. And when we got there, well, he had gone through the surgery. We got there the next afternoon because it's a 12-hour drive from Claremont. And we got there the next afternoon, and he was sitting up in bed, all bandaged up. It had broken his jaw, by the way. All of his teeth were loose. They had to wire him back together, and he was operating his own pump to get mucus out and fluids out of his mouth. So the Lord was already... When he went into the emergency room, he and the doctors they saw his nose was broken over to one side, and they moved it to find out how much it was broken. And he heard a click, and they heard a click, and it snapped in place perfectly. So they said, well, just don't blow your nose for a week. That was that. Then the surgery, his eye had been shattered as though he had been hit with a sledgehammer right over the eye. And when they took x-rays, it was just like just little pieces of broken bones, but in perfect place. So they operated, and there was nothing to do except sew it back. And so that took care of that. And I mean, the Lord's hand in there just so marvelously.
Well, he needed some of that heal and soothe.
He did?
He did, and you didn't have it.
No, he needed what he was getting. He needed good attention, and the
Lord was working in his
life
and he had to know, probably in his wife too, but he had to know that was the Lord. Okay, we've got a couple minutes left. I want to hear about heal and soothe and how you came up with some of these items.
Well, my two favorite items, and I've been making these over 40 years, my two favorite are heal and soothe. And I worked with a nursing home, and I saw patients that had just horrible bed sores, and nothing is consistently good for bed sore treatment. And this particular thing, I worked with the nurse and the 2 doctors that were in charge of the nursing home and came up with this formula, and it has really, God has used this to heal people that would not have been healed otherwise. And it's so economical. $6.95 a prescription item for this same type formula would be over $30. And I know this is effective in most cases. Now remember, there's nothing good for everybody.
That's right.
Because each of us are individual.
That's true.
And then my fungus cream for all types of fungus, except nail fungus. I'll make something else for that. But athlete's foot, jockey itch, creeping eruption, ringworms, all of those, this is the most effective thing that I've seen, and none of these, all of these are made out of natural ingredients.
Is that a fungus? Or
they're not sure exactly.
Okay.
Yes, it is a fungus, but it also, usually it's a blood, it's in the blood, and you have to do something with that.
Okay,
too.
so that's a different...
And I tell about that in yesterday's remedies.
Okay.
I tell about impetigo.
Great. I want to read... I've read it, I'm sure, but I want to read it again. And they will be able to get in touch with you, so I want people to know that they can get in touch with Dr. Richard Harris, Dick Harris, and I think he asked me to call him that. I keep forgetting about it. And he's going to show us exactly where to get in touch with you. I did want to thank a new sponsor that we have, and that's Mountain Lakes Resort that's over in Marshall County, and we thank you very much for being a new sponsor of Vision Plus program, and I think that possibly Dick Harris and the fine products that he makes will be, and the Yesterday's Remedies for Today's Ills will be another sponsor for us. So in the last moments, tell us how we can get in touch with you to get the book and also any of the other remedies, or to get a price list.
On the screen is my address, 448 Juniata Street. And I thought for a long time that I lived on Juanita Street, but it's not Juanita, it's Juniata. Claremont, Florida, 34711. And my phone, if they want to call me when I get back home, which will be the end of the week, 904-394-4230. I'd be happy to send them a list of my products, which I carry around everywhere except when I go to church. I don't pass them out, but everywhere else I wear my hat, and and because it has my book cover on the hat.
I love it.
And it causes a lot of people to look and wonder, and a few read, and a few end up either buying a book or sending them an order. So I appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. It's been a pleasure.
Yes. Dr. Dick Harris.
Glory and honor and power unto him, Jesus, the name above all names. Come into his presence with thanksgiving in your heart and give him praise. Give him praise. Come into his presence with thanksgiving in your heart.